Hello, I am Veenu Keller, the host from Redefine Parenting. I want to welcome you to the Spanglish Network and Her Network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Stick, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs from 2016 and forward. So today I have a very special guest because what makes this near and dear to my heart is I started out my career working with kids with developmental disabilities and adults back in 1999. And I didn't realize that I had a niche for this. I didn't realize that there was something that was tugging on my heartstrings, like why it felt so familiar to work with these adults and these kids. And it was interesting because I was actually at the group home that I was working at, and I was in the staff room because it was an overnight position. And I was like sleeping there, and I was like, why is this so comfortable to me? And then all of a sudden, I remembered that my grandparents ran three group homes in California, and they were called board and care homes back then. And I kind of was raised in these homes where, like, the adults that were there that had mental health issues or developmental disabilities, they were like my friends and they were adults. And I felt so natural and so comfortable. And it's like I got to see these individuals as people. I didn't know they had special needs. I didn't know that there was mental health. I didn't know any of that. I just saw these individuals as individuals that were my friends. And it was kind of weird because like they kind of got me. And so as I felt so natural and curious in this, I got my degree in psychology and I realized like this is the career path I want to take. I want to work with people that have special needs because I want to be a voice for them. I want to help them, advocate for them, to see for people to see the world through their eyes instead of always trying to make them see it through my eyes. So my journey had led me for many, many years being a mental health professional, getting to work with kids birth to 3. And I slowly got out of the field only because mental health in the state that I'm working in, just started to take away all their rights, started to take away all their services. And I was getting so mad. And I felt like as an individual, what can I do? What can I do to stop this madness, if you would? And yet we want to say, oh, mental health awareness, and we need to be more kind to people with special needs. Well, what are we providing them to be able to move forward, to be the independent adults that a lot of them can actually be? So, fast forward into who I am today as a life coach working with parents and children. There's still a little part of me that pulls on my heart when I hear about special needs. And I'm still a great advocate for kids with special needs and for parents that have to write a new story. And I was lucky enough along my path to meet this amazing lady, Shelly Bosh, who has created the Parents Dashboard that gives parents an opportunity to have the tools to overcome the barriers that parents face with kids with special needs. So, Shelly, welcome to Redefine Parenting. And I would just like you to start off, just tell us a little bit about, I know that you're a mom, and what made you have that drive to create the whole Parents Dashboard and what you guys are doing now?
Aw, thank you so much, Fredo. I'm just like really honored to be here and be with you. I know we've had you've been on our Zoom cast for Parent Dashboard, and it was just such a gift for your time. So thank you so much from everybody because what you do is just so special and it really, really helps a lot of people. So I think I have the same drive that every special needs parent has, and that you saw in all those parents that you worked with as someone in the system trying to help them. And what you said about the governments, whether it's where you are or where I am up in Canada or in the UK, all around the world, there are just systemic failures that are happening in our government and our education system, in our medical system, that are just really on our individual levels kind of letting our kids down, letting our families down. And my journey with my son is the reason why I am where I am, as you know, as it happens with, you know, like your kids teach you so much, right? And listening to
Yes.
them is really important. And when their needs aren't being met, just helping them navigate all of these extra barriers. And my son's really my superhero, as is my daughter, who has, you know, also, you know, had her own situations, sort of consequential from his situations, right? So my son, you know, overcomes more in a day than most people have to, you know,
In a lifetime.
in a lifetime. And it's just incumbent, you know, because he inspires me to help him and our family journey through trying to get him what he needs, has inspired me to help other families get what they need. And like you say, you know, the governments, you know, are lacking, and it's not even necessarily because they, you know, like there's budgetary situations, and there's good people in the systems. Like you were a great person in the system, and the system just wasn't set up to actually help people with the
Right.
logistical stuff in their everyday life. Like, it doesn't solve the stress problems. It doesn't solve the financial problems. It doesn't solve, even if you can get money for the government for a piece of equipment or for therapy costs or something like that. It's organizing the workers in case you can't hire the person down the street. It's, you know, dealing with the relationship stress that comes from lack of sleep because they're up all night. All these different, you know, health and wealth and finance pieces that involve the whole mental health, that involve the whole family and impact the whole family when you're supporting around someone who is so special and loved and that you're inspired by. So
Right.
that's why we do what we do at Parent Dashboard.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because, you know, I want to just back up on the journey. I know, being a mom of six, four of them I birthed, you know, I remember the time that I got pregnant. And, you know, I was young. I was 20 when I had my first son. And I remember, as this little life, this miracle of life was growing in me, it was like I had all these fantasies of the kind of mom I'm going to be and the kind of kid he's going to be. And, you know, my grandma used to say, Veenu, you are so nosy. If you could take that child out of you every day and just look at it and put it back, you would. And you know what? She was right. And it wasn't so much of the nosiness. Well, maybe it was, but it was more of the, I wanted to create his future. I wanted to see how he was developing and who he was going to be. And, you know, we have all these stories that we're creating of the parent we're going to be.
Right.
And then what happens? We have this child, and all of a sudden, they're not developing, they're not meeting their milestones. And we have to ask ourselves, you know, what did I do? What did I do wrong? Did I stand in front of the microwave? And this story that I'm sharing right now is actually one of the stories from one of my clients way back when. She blamed herself so much because her daughter had Q22. So that was like the 22 chromosome was partially deleted. And they call that DiGeorge syndrome as well. And so I remember, and it was interesting because I had just gotten into my whole Tony Robbins journey, and I was realizing that I'm changing my life because I'm changing the story. So what if I was able to go into this person's life and help them see a new story? And I think one of the barriers that parents have, and I would love to hear from you, Shelly, is that we create this beautiful story of our kid, and then all of a sudden they start delaying, and we're wondering, like, there's a lot of blame and shame on ourselves, because I saw that through my clients. You know, I mean, even with my son, who you know, he's 28 now, and he still will bang his head. Like, there was like this sensory
Yep.
thing that was not connecting. And my son by no means has special needs per se, but yet there kind of is a special need because he still needs that, you know, that bouncing in the middle of the night, and he's still 28 and it still happens. So what, you know, there was times, I remember when he was 13, he said, you help so many kids, why can't you help me? Like, that was the most devastating thing I've ever had my child ask me. And I cried, and I'm like, okay, I need to help him. So I took him to PTs. I took him to OTs. I was taking him to the neurologist, trying to figure out, like, what is going on with my son. And they couldn't find anything. I remember when he was 2, the pediatrician said, well, maybe he's going to be a drummer. A lot of headbangers are drummers. And I'm like, really? Like, that's the story I'm going to create for this kid? And I'm only 22 at the time. And then I get into these special needs, and I'm watching this family, and I'll never forget. It was like right before Christmas, and everyone's sitting around the table, and I'm walking in, and they're like, "So we just got her back from the testing in Raleigh at Chapel Hill, and we got the diagnosis. And I said, well, do we want to sit and do this, or do you want me to work with her first? And they're like, no, we would like to sit with you and talk to you, because as a team, we need to figure out how we're going to go forward. And they gave me this pamphlet, and I said, thank you. This is somebody else's story. This isn't yours. And I got up and I just opened a drawer and I put that in a drawer, and I said, we're going to allow them to have their story, and we're going to write a new story. Do you know that with DiGeorge syndrome, there wasn't much I could do about the heart defects, because that's part of it. We worked on her behavior. We worked on her language. She was mainstream. She wasn't secluded from other kids. And in that time, this is like, gosh, 2008, so many years ago, we were still getting out of inclusion. We were trying to mainstream, but the fact that we were automatically mainstreaming her because we were getting her to meet her milestones, which services, of course, with the provider. And the family now is friends with me, and they will always tell me, thank you for helping us rewrite our story. And I feel like that's just one barrier, because going back, Shelly, how was it for you, being pregnant, that story, and then finding out your son had these special needs? And I'm curious to know, what special needs did you guys find out, and how that whole journey was for you?
Absolutely. And as you're speaking, I recognize so many, like I talk about the life cycle of a special needs parent, because, when I think back to that time, and then I think now where he's transitioning to adulthood, I recognize all of those pieces that like much like the butterfly has like an egg, a pupa, like, and then they pop out, right? Special needs parents, I feel they have a similar path, in the sense that there's stages, right? Like, so you get your first, something's not quite right. Then you become the FBI agent mama, and you
I love it.
research and you find out and you go everywhere and you find all the things and you're like, yeah, but something's still not right. And they're like, no, no, something's wrong. Spoke with a lady the other day, literally went to a second doctor and got the diagnosis that the first doctor said that wasn't the case, because they refused to do the test because of resources. So, that you finally fight to get that diagnosis, then you have a sense of release, but relief and better confidence, but also that expectation piece about, some people describe it as loss and grief about over what your future mind's eye had for your child. And that process of understanding that our children are actually separate from us, and that they have their own path in life, and you're there to facilitate them as a parent. You don't realize how embedded you are, invested you are in their future for yourself, as well. And so really learning about how, as a parent, to separate that interest, right? And then also for your own well-being, because when you get into the school ages, the next sort of level, and the resources aren't there, and they're letting, they're maybe exacerbating sensory issues, or not, equipped to be able to deal with things. That's the piece that actually landed hardest for me, because my son had a very traumatic experience in the school system, actually bleeding all the way up, but particularly in middle school. And he ended up locked in a buzzer locked room, isolated from peers, isolated, not allowed to go outside, zipped into a tent, a locked tent, when he had self-injurious behavior, guarded by two people, made to wear a helmet that made it harder for him to stay calm. And it was hell, for lack of a better word. And it traumatized him for life. And it took, and my, my, as a parent, trying to navigate that and keep a positive relationship with the school, and not be, that parent, but also like, something's happening with my kid,
And advocate, like, you got to be their voice for them now.
Yeah. And coming up against that system that I was so hopeful would help. And then, having had a good experience in my own childhood with school, then that loss of I can't get my child what they need, and the system has crushed him. I remember the day, Veenu, that we had to pull him out, And he, I remember telling my social worker that I thought that maybe my kids were better off with the life insurance money than me.
Oh,
The expectations that I had on myself, on the system, on my child, and how all of that was tied together was just really they're powerful pieces that you really need support to figure out when you're a special needs parent, to figure out what's best for your family, like what battles you're going to pick, what's really important for your child, because as much lip service as gets paid to your child best, it doesn't pan out like that when okay, yeah, that's good, and now we're going to go do this with your child, right?
right.
And so I'm a really strong, that's why we call our service parent dashboard, because the parents need to really be involved in their own child's advocacy, and definitely self-advocacy for individuals with different diagnoses and needs has to be A1 when they have the capacity. But when they're young and it's really they can't speak for themselves. My son's nonverbal, or pre-verbal, as I changed my language.
I
You
love it.
know, it really becomes you know learning about all of those pieces and what stage you're at in the life cycle. Now I'm at the point where we're through that trauma. We ended up we ended up homeschooling. It took a couple of years just to even settle down and get him back on path, and we did things that they never even thought he was capable of. So when I hear you talking about that brochure that you put in that drawer to tell these parents that this was their story and you can create your own, I completely 100% second that, because you can definitely shape your own reality.
Yeah, and there's a couple things that you said. I think that the diagnosis, like I've always been one, like who cares what the diagnosis is? We got to work with what is going on, and we got to get to the cause, right? So I think a diagnosis does give parents relief because they have the why, right? They
Right.
know, like, okay, it wasn't because I stood in front of a microwave. It wasn't because I drank Diet Coke. It wasn't, all this stuff. I mean,
Or
to be
I'm not crazy. I'm not missing something here. There is actually something wrong. Yeah.
right.
Well, not
And
wrong, but
And I
different.
remember, like, when I had the twins, because I had the twins later on in life, and I was working with a client that had autistic and tendencies. Like, they just were red flags because they were like 1.5. So we were just monitoring. And he was like, always do this with his fingers. And all of a sudden, I got home and I was feeding my daughter, and she started doing that. I'm like, oh my God, she has autism. She has autism. She has red flags.
Right.
So I immediately make a well check appointment with my doctor. And I remember this day like it was yesterday. So my daughter is like, the twins are about 2 years old. And so the doctor tells my husband, Brian, he's like, okay, so we're going to have her wait outside. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so bad. They don't even want me to hear this. And the doctor, and like this doctor has been my boy's doctor. So he's kind of almost like a family friend at this point, right? And he says, okay, she is my worst client. She's worse than doctor. Please help her understand that kids do different things just because. And there's no reason to go look for a diagnosis that's not there. So your kids are fine. Please take her out of my office. And I'm like, oh, dear God. But you know what? It was because I wanted to be proactive. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing the boat. Like, I'm not crazy, that there was something there that. So what do we do? Like, how do we help these parents that maybe are in the field, or they're watching, or they're like, oh my God, my kid does that too. Like, these are all barriers that we as parents have to get through ourselves. And
Right.
where's the support?
And your personal journey, while growing your personal journey while you're supporting them in their needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, just that acceptance piece, because I do want to be clear, like, it took these things aren't necessarily something that need to be fixed, right? Acceptance
Yeah.
about how a person exists in the world, and what their reality are, and trying to stop to imposing your own
Beliefs.
needs, wants, desires, interests on that, and just like allowing them to be. It took the longest time. I just thought that I wasn't doing good enough, wasn't getting him what he needed. And I had to get him here by the time he was adult. And now we're making this adult transition. And it's sort of, oh, okay. So and you have therapy over it, right? Like my therapist will tell me, you know what, given what you had, like what the challenges were and the system treated you like, and like the resources available, you
Mhm.
did everything that you could. And so we just need to like acceptance and self acknowledgement and accurate praise, and just like it,
Yeah.
because it can really get down when you're dealing with not being able to afford all the things, when you're dealing with having thyroid issues, or like stress hives, or just like not anxiety, or all of the mental health pieces, or you're dealing with the siblings issues because
Mhm.
they have basically had the oxygen sucked out of the room, and now they have their own set of issues as a
Right.
result. Like when you're dealing with all those pieces, I kind of explain it like, because people with normal neurotypical kids, sometimes it goes, okay, well, that must be hard, but what's the big deal, really? Right? Like it's just like
Right.
anything else any parent would do, right? And I sometimes explain it like, I don't know if you've ever seen Stranger Things on Netflix, but when there's the upside down, and it's like a mirror image of the world, but it's just very, very different mirror
Right.
image of the world. And
Right.
that's the reality of special needs parents. You can't ever really like get in their head. And sometimes you'll hear special needs parents say, oh, thank goodness you get it. Like when I hear relief in the voice when I say, oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
okay, so you didn't sleep last night. Okay, yeah, I get that. You've got holes in the drywall. Oh, like
Yeah.
oh, okay, there's just sort of like this instant, you know, understanding, and that it can be really that can itself can be isolating,
Mhm.
um and because you can't get out, you can't go out as much, you can't, even when you do get out, you get the kind of the shamey looks in the grocery store because your kid's having a sensory issue that looks like a tantrum, but is actually just like a neurological issue, or like you've got all of this stigma and all these barriers, so like it all kind of just like compounds on you as a parent. And that's again sort of where we come back to like what can we do. We created some very specific sort of things that nonprofits don't do and that governments don't do, that help you with your actual day and with your actual finances and with your actual health. And that's what we love to focus on, the logistics of actual life with parents. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like, I mean, you touched on so much stuff. There's and it's really about these barriers, right? It's starting from going back to the story that we create when we're pregnant with our children, to when they're born, and now all of a sudden there's a different story that we need to create. But one of the things that I want to touch on is not getting stuck in the story of what the doctor
Yes.
says or what other people say. It's creating that new story and what that's going to look like for you, and understanding that nonverbal kids, as they like to say, may not be able to communicate with expressive language, but they know how to communicate. And it's kind of like that FBI parent. It's learning how they are communicating so you can understand their needs and wants. So many times people are, and I don't know, this is a personal opinion, but I feel like the medical field is trying to make us help them come into our world versus teaching
Right.
us how to go into their world, see it through their eyes. And I always used to say, like, I think autism, because autism was one of my, like, a lot of people didn't want to take the kids that were on the spectrum. And not because there was anything that they felt was like wrong with it, but they didn't know if they could handle the right techniques and getting them the right help and how to
Right.
understand them. I migrated to it because it was all behaviors, and I love behaviors. I feel behaviors will tell me more than any other word will ever tell me. So I literally took all the cases that the kids had were diagnosed with autism or red flags for autism because I wanted to specialize in behaviors, which has really helped me in my life. And
Well,
doing so,
behavior is communication.
correct. And so in doing so, looking at these kids, I said, I bet you our brain is so big, they say we use a minute size of it in our lifetime. I feel autistic kids on the spectrum use a different side of their brain, which is more expansive. So they see it and they process it just differently than we do, but they're able to process it. And as a matter of fact, when I have worked with kids, and I used to do ABA therapy, and I loved it because it was all trial error. It was teaching them certain things to be independent and giving them some, not just hope, but like, oh my gosh, I did it. Like, I am independent. And they start as they get older, like you said, transition to the adulthood. It's like, I can do this on my own. Like, I can go to the bathroom on my own. I can make my own sandwich. I can put my own socks on. Like, for us that have these kids that are, like you said, neurotypical, we're like, oh, thank God they finally did it. But because I've watched this with my clients, when my clients at, 5, 6 years old were putting their socks on finally, we freaking celebrated like it was their birthday.
It's even sweeter. All the little wins are even sweeter
Right.
then.
Right. So let's talk about some strategies for parents, like those parents that are going to be listening to us that have just found out that they have a diagnosis with their children or whatnot. What are some of the tips that you can give these parents to really start to overcome the barriers that I feel like society puts on us? Like with school and even the journey with your daughter, right? Because
Yeah.
how she has felt, and like you said when we started off this program, was the barriers that she had to go through too.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that I like to tell a newly diagnosed sort of parent, where they're at that sort of young stage, is, you're in this for the long haul. So, I actually used to work with First Nations folks, and one of the biggest things they taught me was this is 7 generation stuff, and you need to be a marathon runner. So, pick your battles wisely. And
Mm,
the second thing that I kind of recommend is get the right people in your corner. There's a plethora of, you can search up, your local autism groups. You can search up your community resources, but really find someone who, almost like a coach, that you can you know have them go, okay, it's like when you're playing poker and you learn how to play poker and you're being dealt different hard hands of cards, and you need to know, okay, well, do I split it this way or that way? It's just like that. You need somebody who can like show you, oh, okay, this is, if you want this result, then you'll do this, and if you want this result, and really work with you on a plan. And then I say, like, go hard. Don't in hindsight, if I mean, everybody's hesitant to be combative. Like, you don't want to generate negative relationships, and you always want to be positive and constructive. But there is no shame in pushing hard for your child. The systems are set up to be cattle troughs through which we travel, and you will not hurt the system if you push hard to get your kid through it the
right.
way they need. So I am definitely pro parent that way, and pro self advocate, because if there is something about what the systems or the experts are doing to you that doesn't help you with you,
Mm,
then you need to, like, not worry about not listening to that, and just find something that does work. So then I kind of like to tell people, okay, think about the domains of your life. And this comes from sort of my work in case management and actually in the military community. But think about the domains of your life. What are you going to need for your physical health,
mm,
your mental health, your finances, your employment, because all of these things start to impact. When my son was kicked out for 20 days without a suspension because an incident happened, he headbutted his worker at school because they hadn't perceived something, and they did something that agitated, and we found out later, and it set
it
him
was a
off.
trigger. It was a trigger for him.
Yep. And he came home for 20 days. I hadn't expected to leave work for 20 days or have to pay for full-time care at an expensive rate, because I can't just hire the kid next door. So, like, those turn into like real life financial issues and health issues and relationship issues. So, like, coming back to what I like to do is just like help people understand that they're going to have to they're going to see the influence of this on all of the domains of their life, and having a plan for each of those things is something that is a new layer that you, as a parent of complex needs, whether it's diagnosed or not, are
Mm,
going to have to think about.
yeah. Yep, definitely. So, and I would just like to add on that. So, with my work through the years of working with families with special needs, and I do like I've coached families through this. Like I still do that, and like I only have a couple clients that I do, and I'm so glad because it keeps me in touch with that part of me of my the beginning of my journey. And so, one of the first things I tell parents is give yourself grace. Give yourself grace, whatever that looks like for you. You know, if you do not recharge yourself, you're going to give you don't have the best of you anymore. You're going to give the rest of you. And
Absolutely.
so you have to, where do you need to plug in? Like, what does that mean to you? Does that mean reaching out for respite care, or creating that tribe? Because it takes a village to say, hey, look, I just need a couple hours, can you please come? If it's their nap time or whatever, like, find that opportunity to give yourself grace. That's one of the things I say. Another thing I say is be an advocate. You got to be their voice. You got to be their voice, especially at school. Like, there's so many times that, as a case manager, I was going in to write the first IEP or the behavioral implementation plan, the BIP plan, and parents would just be like, okay, 30 minutes of speech therapy in class. And I'm like, no, no, they don't want that. No, 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 no. I've been working with his child and he needs one-on-one. He will not thrive with speech therapy 30 minutes
Right.
a week in
Right.
class. He needs to be pulled out in order to work with him.
Right.
Okay. Okay, well, we could do that. So, okay, we're only going to do 30 minutes a week of physical therapy. The kid is still learning how to walk and he has technology walker to use, and you're telling me only 30 minutes a week of physical
Yep.
therapy? Absolutely not. And I'll pull out the family handbook and I'll say, tell me where it says this. And I really help the parents walk through, because they don't know. They go in and they think they're going into these schools and the school knows everything. This is their forte.
Yeah, they position themselves as authorities, right?
Correct. And so, what I had to help parents do for so long, and sometimes still do, is you need to be the voice. Do you think the care that they're going to get is going to take care of your child's needs? If it is a no, you need to go back and you need to figure out what is it that they need. Because I'm going to tell you, I've had families that have sued the school district.
Yep.
They have won, and they got their kids put in, the other classes that they needed, and the school had to pay for it.
Yep.
The school had to
No,
pay
and
for it.
I've had an IEP in Washington State, and I've had an IEP in British Columbia, and unfortunately, there's a little bit different legal teeth that each have, but those are what those documents are for. And going in with your eyes open and your support system and your squad
Right.
is like super critical in being able to navigate and that's just the school piece.
Right.
There's also like the medical system
Correct.
and all of your like your personal what I feel like parents especially need the support is like definitely like what you're saying, coaching people around and that sort of stuff, but in the areas where there is no system at all,
Right.
like where it's the realm of your personal life,
Mhm.
and it's your responsibility, particularly in the area of finance, and you may or may not have grown up with money, or you may or may not have perceptions of money and what wealth is or what you need, or you may or may not be able to hold a job because of your child's medical or physical needs, or you may be being called off a job and be putting either your promotions or maybe even your job itself at risk, because you're having to constantly come home, or constantly your productivity may be
I'm
low.
off. Right.
Yeah. And like those are the areas that I feel like we really understand and do a lot of coaching in, we have to, even if you added up all of the coaches in all of the areas for complex needs parents, we still wouldn't have enough at
No,
this time.
I agree. I agree. And the third thing that I wanted to add with the barrier, well, first of all, make sure you know what a barrier is. I love
Right.
Marie Forleo. She says, if it's a problem, it's figure outable. Everything is figure outable, but you got to know, you got to have clarity of what you're trying to figure out. How do you turn your problems into possibilities? What is it that you're going to learn? What's the gift in that problem
And
that,
it can, it can be really hard to see
It
when you're in that crisis moment, right?
That's why it helps to have support.
Yeah, no, exactly. And getting that coaching and that understanding. So like when your child is in the middle of the meltdown, the sensory meltdown, and what you said before about giving yourself grace and being able to sort of step back and self-care,
Mhm.
it's really hard to remember to do that when your
It is.
child is putting their head through the car window, like happened to my son. Like,
Yeah.
but developing it, you almost become, you develop skills akin to a military veteran in terms of focus, because you're dealing with this like real life crisis right in front of you, and you have to kind of like emotionally distance yourself and be able to manage the damage, right? And then you have to like also model, because it's in those moments that those behaviors get entrenched.
Mhm.
So if I am constantly not centered, not grounded, not in my own space and self and ability, and I am just like reacting to the child, not only does it not help the child through it, but it doesn't model for them that it can actually make the behaviors worse,
Worse.
because then they realize, and my son went through this, where it started as sensory stuff, and because I was so panicked and like concerned
You
about
got
him,
his outcome met.
I fed into it, and then he learned, oh, this is how I get what I need. And it
Right.
turned into a learned behavior. So you have to be really careful about how and knowing those things ahead of time is something that you can really only get either from the professional or from a coach that you
I agree. And you know what though? It's not even special needs kids. Like
no,
let's just
I mean
talk
that,
about
yeah,
like
it's true of everything. It's
all
just more
humans.
intense.
What's their formula? What's their formula to get your attention? What's their formula to get you to
Right.
see them? What's their formula to get you to hear them?
Yep.
When I say to parents, I'm like, when your kid's yelling at you, ask yourself, what is their need right now?
Right.
And it's they want to be heard. And how do they learn that? Because when we're not being heard as a parent, what do? We raise our voice.
Right.
It's to the point, and I've shared this before in a past show, is like I tell my kids, you have the remote control to my voice. And there's a way that my volume goes up, and there's a way you could turn it down. And I asked them, and I said, how do you turn my volume up? And they say, we just don't have to listen to you. And I said, exactly. And how do you turn it down? We need to listen to you. So now when my voice starts to escalate, I'm like, up, who has the remote control? Because my voice is going up.
That's
And they're like,
great.
and then they'll say, oh, you go take a shower. Like, no, don't let mom's voice, like, go. And like, they'll figure it out. I give them these tools to figure out how to, number one, self manage. Number
Right.
two, that they are in control of how I react to them. Right. So, how do they take ownership for their behavior? And it's a learned thing. If we're going to teach our kids learned behaviors, let's teach them in a way that's conducive to all of us. Like,
Yeah, and I don't think that fundamentally, like, there seems to be like quite a bit of, but I can't, he can't do that, or I can, like, and I think that still fundamentally applies to special needs. And it took
absolutely.
me a really, really long time to understand that, because I was like so worried. And again, it's that sort of like your own expectation and filter on what should be and how should be. That was what was kind of getting in the way. And yes, like, yes, my son has apraxia, so he has difficulty connecting the muscles and getting it out. But as soon as I put the expectation that it was still his job to communicate in his mind, and I entrusted him with that authority, that he then started to go, oh, okay, I'm not just going to play victim anymore. I'm not just going to rely on everybody else anymore. I am responsible. And there was frustrations, like it was hard, but that's also the same frustrations that any kid does
It's
growing up,
growing,
right?
right?
Growing a skill, being able to do. And in fact, what it did was it built his confidence and helped him get further faster, because he started to feel like, okay, people don't think that I'm stupid. People, like, don't talk to me like
They
I'm not
see
here.
him.
Like, yeah, they see him, then I am here. People do think I can do. I am, responsible for myself. And, their mom still, gets those suckers, like, like the heartstrings pulled and the batted eyes, or, but my son is so good at that now. And you really have to presume competence,
Yes.
because, for example, when I've trained so many workers, and every time a worker comes to my house, I say, my son can tell within 30 seconds how you think about someone with disabilities or someone with autism. And he can size them up and go, okay, you're one of those. You don't
Mm.
think that I can do. And you know what? My coping mechanism for that is going to be to pretend that I don't and get you to do everything for me. And he is like so
Good.
perceptive. And that's like, I mean, who wouldn't? Like, I would trade feeling like an idiot for feeling like I'm in control instantly as well. I mean, that's a brilliant solution, coping mechanism for that.
Right.
But we don't need to push them into that kind of coping mechanism when we just acknowledge their competence and even when they can't express. You know, many of our clients, you know, are in wheelchairs and incapacitated, but I don't talk past them to the person that's with them. You know, like I talk to them or with them and, you know, oh, how is today going? Do you mind if I ask your worker about that? And then I, you know, acknowledge, right?
It's acknowledging them as a human being,
Yeah.
that they're not just a shell, you know. And so you touched on one thing, and then I want to switch over to siblings. Um, a lot of times, and I've seen this both ways. I've seen, oh, well, they have ADHD, or oh, they have autism. So they create this excuse versus results.
Right.
And and so you don't even know your own kid's potential when you're succumbed by the diagnosis. And that's why I'm not a big fan of diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of a fan of like, what do we need in this moment to get their needs met? And how can we teach them how to meet their own needs? You know, so
Absolutely.
I'm a big advocate on that, and not using that as an excuse, you know,
Yep.
not using it like, I have clients and their parents are divorcing, and it's like, well, it's because of the divorce. Let's help them process their feelings with the divorce so we could stop using that as an excuse. Because regardless if you get divorced or not, your kids still need to grow up and be independent, happy adults. Right.
Yes.
And so by giving them the excuse, all you're doing is teaching them to have that excuse to, oh, it's because of this. Oh, it's because of that.
Right.
Take ownership. So that's like one of the things also. And, I commend you for seeing your son's potential and allowing him to show you what his potential is and to become as independent as he can. Cause that's what a great gift for him and for you, right? That he's doing stuff on his own. Um, we have just like 10 more minutes. So I just wanted to touch on this because I do see this also, especially now when we're looking at the way the world is. A lot of us, the world has been isolated, with the COVID, and now we're breaking through that and we're coming back in. And one of the things that I even saw pre-COVID is with the siblings is there's two things I see. I either see siblings growing up to be very empathetic and feel like they need to be the caregiver, and there's some guilt around it if they're not. And that's how they get their significance and how they get their connection and all their needs met is by helping their sibling.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also seen the other flip side of that, where they're rebelling because they always felt they were, I don't know if the word's insequential, but like not in existence because they're
They were
siblings.
the ones that were invisible.
Correct, because they didn't have the special needs. You didn't have all the doctor's appointments. You didn't have to come to school for me. You didn't sit there and, sit with the provider, like where's me? Like you just knew I was going to do it. And so when is it my turn? And so when they become teenagers, we start to see a whole new behavior with
Yes.
our neurotypical kids because they feel kind of jaded, you know?
Just well, and I think I am not sure. You're actually probably better at even the neurological aspects of this than stuff. But there are MRI imaging of a neglected child's brain versus another brain, and it through no fault of the parents. When you have to, like with my son, it's son, daughter, son, daughter, just because of the needs, right? And so that other sibling is not getting all of the things that they need, and whether it affects the actual brain development or whether it affects their emotional development, then that manifests later.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with my daughter. She started presenting with various different issues, and in a sense it wasn't me too. It had nothing to do with that, but it is literally the manifestation of the things that they didn't get before. And so as a parent going, if you're newly diagnosed, watch out for that, because if you can somehow figure out the balance, or at least how to get those critical needs of the sibling met, you will save yourself so much you personally, but also your child. You will help your child so much down the road if you can kind of make sure that those other pieces are balanced. And one thing that I always tell my daughter is like, yes, you are not responsible for, and part of my motivation for developing our social purpose enterprise was actually to make sure that my daughter didn't have that responsibility, not just emotionally, but financially and legally, and that he had his own system set up because she deserves her own life and she has her own path and her own skills and her own gifts, and she's a unique soul here on the planet. So
Right.
that's completely separate from him. And yes, obviously she's tied to her brother, but it's a very complex thing because when you do give them that space, then they have the space to feel about that. And sometimes that's also a challenge, right? It's like,
Right.
but you help them process that, and then they become healthy and have tools to be able to deal with that. So it's really, it can become quite tricky, but it's really worth it to make that investment.
Absolutely. And I also feel that, like, whether they're neurotypical, whether they're special needs, there's also sometimes a guilt that comes with siblings, is that like they feel left out and now they feel guilty for feeling left out
Right.
because their brother or their sister are nonverbal, they're
Mhm.
like stuck in a wheelchair, and they feel guilty because they're going to cheerleading camp, they're going to
Right.
sports, and they're able to go out with friends and play while their siblings never been able to do that. And yet, so it's helping them process, like you said, that emotional balance. And so one of the strategies that I would share with parents is, if you have this going on where you have a child that's special needs and a child that is neurotypically developing, that you make time where they are seen and you ask them constantly, you know is there anything that you need from me? Is there anything that I can do to show you how much I appreciate you and I love you? Make that special time for you and your child. Like, this is mine and your time. Like, we're going to go and do this together. I mean, I do that with my kids now. Like, today's me and my daughter day, tomorrow's me and my son day. And
And that is okay. You don't have to feel guilty about doing that too.
right,
That was, for the longest time, it was sort of like how it's taboo to kind of expect, okay, disabled child, you're going to manage, on your own without me for a minute, like you don't, as a mom, it's like, right? But you
and
have
because
to,
we also say like, oh well, they're not going to understand because they're so used to me being there. And
right.
there comes a time where you need to cut the cord. You need to let them know, like, you're going to be okay. Like, you're going to be okay for 2 hours while I take your brother out, or I take your sister out, or or me and dad. Like, and that's the other thing. And I know, like, we probably can go on a whole nother topic, but to remember, especially like when you're married, is to make sure your foundation is strong. And how do you do that?
Right.
Take time for you guys. Keep your foundation strong between you two. Talk about how you feel. Talk about, like, men are not mind readers. We women are emotional creatures. And we have to voice that to our spouses, because guess what? The partners in our life want to help us. They want to protect us. They want to make us feel safe. And if that's going to happen, we need to tell them what our formula is for all of that. Because if we're,
And that men, you don't need to fix this. this
yes,
is this is not, you are not failing by admitting that there is something different about your child. You are not failing to, if your child can't get everything what they need. This is not about you not being able to provide for your family. This is, you just being present and being there and supporting your family is enough. I
it
just
is.
want to say.
And I would just definitely ask, like, what's the definition of that? Like, I have a family and they have a child that has special needs. They have pandas. And so when the neighborhood's not understanding the outbursts and the behaviors that child's having, and mom feels she's doing it by herself, it's like, well, have you told dad what you needed? Like, because he's not going to mind read. And as soon as she's able to do it and dad literally understands, not through his filters, but through her filters, all of a sudden there's a cohesiveness again. And it's like,
Absolutely.
oh, wow, he is on our side. He does understand that, he's not embarrassed of our child. He wants to help our child. And the way to do that is to allow the neighborhood to know, like, look, we're not trying to change anything. We're not trying to change your opinion. We're just trying to say, hey, look, can you at least support us to support our son? Because we do have help. We do have a coach to help our son through these behaviors and to help our family transition with this and grow through this. And it's so important that everyone is part of the puzzle, and everyone needs to be heard, and everybody needs to be understood. And we all have different filters. I mean, we all delete, distort, and generalize the information we hear each and every moment based on our beliefs. So if you can imagine a child that does have special needs, that doesn't process as we process, that it takes different ways to get to communicate to them so they can try to understand it through our filters. Give yourself grace and give yourself, again, praise yourself for the job that you're doing, and be open to understanding and seeing the world through their eyes. So we have a couple more minutes. Shelly, do you want to just take us, like, do you have any, like, what are your top takeaways that you can give parents? And also if you could just share a little bit about the parents dashboard in the next couple minutes, so that,
Oh,
you're a great resource for people. I know you're in Canada, and yet I know your website's a great thing. I know you guys offer a lot of different programs and stuff. And even if they're not in Canada, I'm sure if they reached out that you guys have different resources for them. So
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, folks are welcome to come to our website, parentdashboard.ca. And we do have a Facebook community. So through our journey, we developed basically a hands-on care system, but that's just for, like our local area, although it's growing, so it may be expanding. But when COVID shut down, we basically had to pivot to support our families online. And so we developed all sorts of different things, but mostly around things that you can't kind of get from government or nonprofits, because we didn't want to duplicate. So, if you need anything around, how to deal with flexible income earning options, or support around, your health, wealth, we basically offer those things online now. But moreover, I think what we're excited about that we're doing is we've developed social enterprises, business to business activities that we do with businesses that actually develop funds that will actually start to pay for hands-on caregivers to reduce costs. So that's basically sort of the models that we're working on, because as government funds shrink and those resources go away, we can't nobody may be coming to save us. So we kind of have to figure out new models to be able to pay for things, to be able to get things we need. And the world is changing. Technology's changing. Just being able to be here with you today is amazing, and to share what we're doing if it sparks some interest somewhere, we're more than happy to help. But we've just mostly really appreciated, being able to talk with you, have you on our show, and now to be here with you has just been like real honor. And so thank you for everything you do, because it's just phenomenal.
Thank you. And, I just want to say, one of the things that I've learned from one of my mentors is don't go and reinvent the wheel. And if you are in a space in your life where you feel you're going through these barriers and these obstacles, and you are not in Canada, you might be in the UK, you might be in Australia, you might be in the United States, reach out to Shelly, because she is a resource, and she will be able to support you in figuring out, like, what did she have to go through? And, like, I love that you said further, faster, because I feel like, it takes a village, and this is part of the village of helping these families go further, faster, and not have to duplicate all the barriers that you've had to go through. So, Shelly, thank you so much for doing what you're doing for all those families with special need kids. I appreciate you. I see you. And I'm just so glad that you took time, especially it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So, there's a lot of mental health that comes along with special needs as well. And again, we could probably do a whole nother show on that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. This show can be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you all.